And I was reading your leaflet earlier, and I was reading that you work with some children working with painting in collaboration with the sound. What was your experience of that, bringing
Yes.
sound and painting colour together?
Well, this was the first time I've worked a lot in schools, and this in the article that you read. It referred to the very first time I'd had some teachers in a workshop I was giving, and they were teaching this primary school in Islington, and they said, would I come and work with the children? And they got the head of music for that part of London to join in as well, and the head teacher and everybody. It became quite a big thing. And I had this class, and I started doing it, and one of the most amazing thing about that time was, actually, and I'll answer your question, there was a boy there who, from Singapore, and he'd been in the school 6 months and hadn't said a word. He hadn't opened his mouth in 6 months. And they were all really desperate. They didn't know what to do, how to help him, what to do. So I sat down with this class. I knew nothing about them. And I demonstrated the overtones. And there was this kind of amazing hush as everybody went, oh, miss, that kind of thing. And then this boy who had never said a word spoke. It was like the oracle speaks. And he said, oh, I saw a coconut, and the coconut split apart, and a rainbow came out.
And that was his first words.
Those were his first words in
Poetry.
6 months. Can you imagine?
Wow.
I mean, and it was describing himself, It was like, he'd been split open like a coconut, and what came out of him was a rainbow. And it was really extraordinary, because actually with the overtones, the best analogy really is white light. If you put white light through a prism, like a raindrop, or something like a prism hanging in the window, then as we know, you see rainbows everywhere, or a rainbow if it's the rain. In other words, the white light splits and reveals what it actually is, which is the rain. The whole prism of the rainbow, all the different colours. But we don't normally see them unless it goes through a prism. And it's the same with the voice. It's exactly the same. So somehow that boy knew, when we make a sound, it's just like white light. It contains lots of other colours that we don't see, that we don't hear. But as soon as you put it through a filter, a vocal filter, then suddenly you hear all the colours of the voice, which are these high flute-like sounds. So somehow this boy, by saying that, got it in a moment. He heard the rainbow colours coming out of this coconut. So it was extraordinary that. I mean, we were all absolutely, astonished and awe-inspired by that. So then what happened was that the whole school was so amazed by this whole experience that after I'd been working with them, they then had a painting session. And so they decided to have the children paint their experience, what they'd seen, what they'd heard, what had happened to them. And then after that, they then went into poetry, to writing poetry, and they then started writing about the experience. So it was multidimensional. It was a very extraordinary day altogether. And then the parents, when the children got home and they were full of this thing, the experience of the sound and the pictures and the poetry, the parents said, "Whoa, what's been happening to these children?" They were so thrilled.
What are you doing to my children?
Absolutely. And actually, one of the things that I remember people painting, and sometimes in schools, you'll have some child start painting, then others will be quite influenced by that, and then they'll do something similar. But one of them I remember, which actually a couple then started copying. They'd drawn and these were really young children. They'd drawn a sort of road going into a straight road going into the distance, and sitting there, floating above the road, was a kind of monk type lama figure with crossed legs floating in midair. So it was like the road was the sound, and the lama or the sort of monk-like figure floating with cross-legged, levitating actually, what he was doing, was really like what happens to you when you do this. There's a real sense of the fundamental note, which is like the straight road, and then as soon as you take off, it's like you're flying actually. So again, they saw that, and that was one of the most extraordinary images that came out of it.
Yeah. Profound work, just beginning with the making the sound and how that influences everything.
Everything.
And your expression and your how open you are to inspiration and your physical body. It's really
Absolutely
multi-dimensional.
Yes. I know, and also it's profoundly. I mentioned to you earlier. I had this when we spoke on the phone. I had this real dose of my own medicine. I'd been really ill with a kind of gastric thing, which I don't. Fortunately, I haven't. Tended not to get these kind of things as they go around, but I did, and I'd had 5 days of it, and a really high temperature, 102, and after 5 days, I was really, I can't go on dying, and then I had to give a workshop, and so I had to give the workshop. I had no choice, so I got up and started teaching, and within half an hour of chanting, I was healed. I was better. After 5 days of 102 temperature, really high temperature, 5 days of the most appalling kind of, gastric flu, or well, not flu, but these kind of bugs that go around, really horrible. And then after half an hour, everything stopped of chanting. After half an hour of chanting, everything stopped.
Half an hour is not long.
It's not long. It was extraordinary, after 5 days. So it's really instantaneous, actually. It can be very, very immediate.
Yeah.
Because the whole body is sort of revved up and tuned up and, made coherent and activated. Because so often everything kind of falls asleep and becomes like a kind of instrument that's out of tune. And the moment you start doing this, especially this particular form of chanting, it's dramatic.
So we all need to get in tune.
We all need to get in tune. Absolutely. The sooner the better, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And what workshops have you got coming up? Because I know you do also work with shamanism and family constellations and ritual as well. So
yeah, I've got the next. I've got another inner sound and voice workshop. I sometimes call them healing voice workshops. I've got another one of those coming up on I think it's the 9th, 10th of June, if that's a weekend, I think it is. And then on the 15th of June, I have a week intensive from the 15th to the 22nd, which is my work, Healing the Family and Ancestors. And this is a really extraordinary kind of work. And it's a combination of what have come to be called family constellations type work with sound, chanting and trance type movement, which I've developed over the last 15 years.
So you use movements as well?
Between each person, we have this sort of trance type activity and chant before each person works and at the end, so the work kind of goes into that at the end. So the whole thing is contained in a much bigger envelope of sacred chant. So the whole thing is very, very sacred. Each one is like a sort of shamanic healing rite. And I think the levels go much, much deeper than when it's done in a rather sort of business-like way. And I've had people work with me, many, many, many times, because every time I work with somebody, we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And at one time you can only work with one issue, the one that's presenting most. And you never know in advance what that's going to be. It reveals itself in the moment. And if you try and work with lots of things at once, it dilutes itself. So you need to really work with that issue. And then, a month might go by or a month and a half. And then if you come back then when you work, something completely different reveals itself to be worked on, which you couldn't possibly have accessed without dealing with this other thing first. So it's really like going deeper and deeper and deeper, getting to the more and more fundamental issues. So sometimes people do a whole series of them. I do 5 weekends of it a year. So the next weekend isn't until the end of September, the last weekend of September. And then there's one in October and one in December. But the week intensive, which I'm going to do, it's a residential week intensive in this 15th of June in Somerset near Glastonbury. And I work with each person individually within the group. And it's wonderfully spacious doing it. And we have a summer solstice celebration. And so it's because we're living together intensely, and, the level of work is exquisite and deep and transformative and instant. Changes happen instantaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you if, you know, you being at Glastonbury, if you include, you know, being out in nature, but it's the solstice, so
yes. So so where I teach is just outside Glastonbury, in the countryside. So we do stuff outside, but mainly mainly it's inside. But we do definitely do some things outside as well. Yeah, yeah.
And from my experience this weekend, it's also a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
also really enjoyable, you know, because you can move. Well, for me, I at the end there we were doing a kind of group ceremony with voice, and I was being bathed in the sound, and I really released so much, and I really yelled and screamed, which you don't give yourself the opportunity to do very much. So a part of me was really joyful about being able to express myself in that way and give myself that.
Absolutely, yes. So I think ceremony is very, very important, and I work with it increasingly, and so it's really important because then you have the witness, the people that you're doing it with see the changes that you're going through, and then they can uphold that for you. You know, you don't have to go back to the. So if you make changes, normally nobody else knows you've made them, and so they treat you as if you were before, and then you become as you were before. But if you're doing it surrounded by people who witness what you're going through, what you're changing, what's happening, then they uphold the new you. It's so clear. And so I'm more and more interested in ceremony, and I've been doing some very big ceremonies based on the mandala, where the group becomes the mandala and gets activated, and we work on all kinds of issues that we have at the same time as doing this whole ceremony with chant and sacred practice as well, over a period of 5 days within a week workshop. So we're doing, so like the ceremony we did in one afternoon, it's like we're doing it for 5 days, and it's absolutely intense and utterly magical and the greatest fun. Because for me, if the work isn't fun, forget it. It has to be fun. If you take it too seriously, it's boring. It has to be fun. It must be fun. And if it's fun, something really happens. For me, it's absolutely key that it's fun and amusing, but while being at the same time really, working deeply too. It's that's kind of clear and understood that the work that's happening is extraordinarily powerful. That's never challenged, but the process is fun and light and yeah. Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
Absolutely essential. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to post a link for Jill's website below this video, so you can check that out and see all her courses and what she has to offer. And I highly recommend coming to her weekend. And the
next weekend actually is it's middle of June, and then I have one at the end of the other one I have before the summer is the last weekend of June, so 30th of June and 1st of July, and then I go off and teach in North America over the summer. So and the website also is easy to remember as well. But you'll be posting it. But it's also healingvoice.com, and you can reach me on info@healingvoice.com. And but anyway, you'll be posting that. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you came.
Yeah.